Welcome to Spiritual Steps, a podcast about learning to pray, listen, and grow by taking small steps on the spiritual journey. I'm your host, Stephen Hovatter, and this is episode 17, Stretch the Silence. Silence is at the heart of prayer, okay? And that is tough for me. I admit to being a little silence averse. I'm a loud person. I'm usually very eager to fill the void in conversations, and even when I'm alone, when I'm by myself, I often rush to fill that space, the quiet space, with some sort of sound, whether it's music in the background or the endless noise of social media, which is, visual noise, but it's noise nonetheless. Or, of course, there's a stack of podcasts that are ready to play in my queue, always ready to roll. And even one of those, my podcast app of choice, I love to listen to stuff on Overcast. And it even has this feature that when I listen to things, it's this thing that Marco Arment developed into the app called Smart Speed, which actually eliminates silences. Like when people pause in the app, when you pause in a podcast and you're listening to it in the app, it shrinks down that pause. So it just sounds like the person just keeps on talking. And, okay, so that's maybe an efficient way to listen to podcasts, but it's sort of sinister in real life. And that's me, okay, because I'm always trimming out the silence. And, when you are in pursuit of a life of prayer, that can be really tricky. See, our first steps of prayer begin with words, okay? Those words serve as an entryway into the life of prayer. You learn to pray by saying things like, thank you, or be with so-and-so, my friend, or, God, please grant me some request or some bit of forgiveness or grace, or maybe a practice of prayer, of adoration of God, or something like that. At any rate, we begin with words, right? But as we progress in prayer, there comes a time when we have to confront our own resistance to silence. Our prayers outgrow those words. And we find that there's this place for simply just being still and quiet before God and taking the posture of listening, obedient servants, rather than just chattering away about whatever occupies our minds at the time. In that form of prayer, and the deepened form of prayer, silence of heart, it becomes a sort of condition for the deepened prayer, for deepening of prayer. And in this episode, I want to introduce you to an exercise that can help you develop your capacity for keeping silence. It's a practice that I call stretching the silence. And really, it's just a simple meditation practice. And I want to break it into 3 steps for you, okay? I'll say, so first, step 1, begin by turning off whatever distractions you easily can, okay? And then stop fiddling with them. That's really important, okay? So look around and take stock of your space and hear and recognize the sounds that exist in it. Okay, and then say to yourself, this is my space. I cannot control it, but I will be quiet today in this space. All right, so this is a way of cutting off the tendency to want to keep fiddling with the space to get it perfectly silent. Like when I was getting ready to record this podcast, I turned off the air conditioners. I even unplugged the refrigerator because it was making this loud hum. And I turned off my phone because it was making these notification sounds and dinging all the time. And I was kind of like going around the room and trying to think about what. And then somebody's like mowing the lawn outside, and there's that too. And, okay, whatever. I'm trying to have a quality podcast recording, but I do the same thing with my prayer life. I try to control that environment completely and turn off everything that I can. And there's some of that's okay, that's good. But you have to come to there's this limit of that. And at some point you have to come to a place where you say, I'm not in control of my space completely. And I have to kind of relinquish that. Because all that fiddling comes from that desire to be in control my surroundings, or, it also comes from this desire to excuse my own lack of silence by blaming my environment on it. So I either want to control it or blame it. And it's helpful for me to engage in a practice of silence, to recognize my space in all of its distracting glory, and then commit to being silent in it regardless of that quality. Okay, so that's step 1 is quiet what I can externally, and then recognize it, and then commit to being silent in it. Okay, step 2, practice my own silence of mouth and mind, and with my eyes closed. Okay, so I close my eyes and I try to become fully and completely still, except for my breathing, quiet except for the sound of my breath, and I breathe fully and deeply, and I relax. Take refuge in the silence. Don't feel like you need to squash all the little thoughts that come to your mind, okay? Because when you're trying to practice something like this, like thoughts will certainly come, but just acknowledge those thoughts and pass them on. Just let them kind of flow through and then go their own way. And don't resent them. Don't resent those thoughts for disturbing your quiet, but don't feel like you need to hold on to them and dwell on them either. I mean, that's kind of how I had to pass them on, right? Or let them pass on. Because if you become resentful of those thoughts for like your own inability to keep from having them, then it's counterproductive. So just let them be. And then just be like this, okay? And do this step of quiet, eyes closed, refuge in silence. Do it for as long as you can without feeling too anxious about the time. Okay, when you start worrying about the time too much, then ease yourself out of it. Even if you just do it for a minute or two at the beginning, that's a great start. Okay, and as you repeat the exercise, you'll find that you can do it for longer and longer periods of time without developing that sort of anxiousness about it. Okay, now the step 3 is to do the same thing again, only this time do it with your eyes open. Okay, so open your eyes and have that same kind of space and time where you're breathing and quietly, fully relaxed and all that kind of stuff. But instead of using your silence as a refuge, be fully present in your space. Be attentive to your space. Be quiet and still, but in that space. And be like that for about the same length of time as you sat with your eyes closed. So you want to so what we're doing here is we're kind of retreating and then we're entering into the space. We're kind of retreating into our silence and then entering back into the space, still like bringing the silence with us back into that place. And so do it about the same amount of time as you do with your eyes closed. And if you have time, okay, you might want to like cycle through this stuff, right? So you let this time with your eyes open and you're breathing quietly, you're seeing yourself, and you might lead that back to that first step where you recognize all that's around you, repeat that commitment to silence. You say, this is my space, I cannot control it, but I'll be quiet today in this space or something like that. And if you wish, then you can go back into like closing your eyes and kind of retreating, taking refuge again, okay? And then do it again with your eyes open, kind of enter back into the space. Kind of just go back and forth. And as you use this exercise over time, or some of the kind of meditative practice like it, you'll find that your capacity to receive and maintain silence will stretch. It'll grow. It'll become more of a natural thing to you. And as it does, you're creating a condition in which your prayer life can deepen. Now, this isn't an automatic mechanical thing. That's not the way prayer works. It's not like a vending machine. You put in a couple of minutes of silence and you get out some new depth of life. But it's just a function of learning to relinquish control and become a more attentive person. These are the kind of conditions in which prayer flourishes. So, learn to stretch the silence in your life. Have this sort of practice, these sorts of exercises where you engage intentionally in silence. And don't be frustrated. Take it step by step. Look, earlier I said silence doesn't come easily to me, but I have to say too, I want to give the testimony that says it comes easier to me now than it used to. And each time I practice the art of stretching out the silence, it gets just a little bit easier. Silence is at the heart of prayer. It's the real space of prayer. Learn to walk into that space and to be present in it, present in the silence, and stretch that silence. Okay, that's all for this episode. Thanks for listening. I really do appreciate people that have given their time to listening to the episodes and kind of following along. If you have any comments or questions or just want to extend the conversation, please feel free to reach out on Twitter. My username is @StephenHovatter. And if this sort of thing is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. Whatever podcasting app you love, iTunes or Google Play or whatever. And soon we'll be back with a new episode and you'll be ready to catch it. Until then, keep taking the next step that you see in front of you, and may God be with you on each step of your journey. Peace.